Hello, how are you? I want to invite you to take a deep breath, and as you listen to these words, let your mind settle. Let your body relax, because today we're going to talk about something that scares many people. But if you discover it, it can become one of the most liberating experiences of your life, learning to be alone and to love solitude. First, let me tell you something you might not like, but it's necessary. Being alone does not mean being empty. It does not mean being broken. It does not mean that nobody loves you. Being alone, when you choose it and live it consciously, can be the deepest act of self-love you could ever give yourself. Society has filled us with messages that made us believe that if we don't have a partner, if we're not surrounded by people all the time, then something is wrong with us. And you believed it. You believed that your worth depended on always having someone by your side. But let me tell you, that's not true. Solitude is not a punishment. It's a space where you can find yourself, listen to yourself, and heal wounds you may not even know exist when you're always accompanied. It's that silence that at first feels uncomfortable, but then becomes your safe place. If you want to start loving solitude, there's a first key: change your perspective. Instead of thinking, I'm alone because something's missing, think, I'm alone because I'm giving myself time. And when you see it that way, you'll notice it doesn't weigh you down, it supports you. Picture this: an ordinary afternoon. You're at home. No noise, no notifications, no voices. Just you, a cup of coffee, and that silence that once made you uneasy. Suddenly, in that quiet, ideas, memories, and projects start to appear. You realize solitude is a mirror, and when you look at it without fear, it reflects your best image. That's why the first key is befriending silence. Stop trying to fill every gap with noise, messages, distractions, because when you fill everything, you leave no space for yourself to appear. Here's something I want you to understand from the beginning. Solitude isn't imposed, it's cultivated. It doesn't just happen because you walked away from others, it happens because you learned to feel good with yourself without depending on constant presence from others. Look, many people run from solitude because they think it will hurt. And yes, at first it's uncomfortable because it forces you to face yourself. When there's no one around, you can't distract yourself with other people's conversations, other people's problems, outside stories. You're face to face with your own inner world. And that's the moment when some get scared, because thoughts that were buried under layers of noise start to surface. They remember unresolved things, or realize they've spent years covering up with relationships what they didn't dare to face. The second key to loving solitude is accepting what shows up in it. Don't use it to escape from yourself. Use it to find yourself. If in those moments of silence you feel sad, listen to that sadness. Ask it what it wants to tell you. If you feel anxious, don't rush to find distractions. Observe what's triggering it. It's like opening a window after it's been closed for a long time. At first, dust comes in, cold air, maybe a gust of wind that unsettles you, but then light begins to enter. And that light is the clarity you need to understand who you really are, what you want, and what you're no longer willing to accept in your life. Someone who learns to be alone isn't someone who gives up on love or companionship. It's someone who knows they can choose them, not depend on them. Because solitude, when lived well, gives you power. And that power is the freedom not to need, but to prefer in the moment. Maybe you're thinking, yes, but I can't, I'm not used to it, it scares me. And I understand. But everyone, absolutely everyone, can learn this. It's an emotional habit you train, just like you learn to walk, to drive, or to cook. Only this time, the main dish is you. When you dare to be alone, you discover something surprising. Not all company is good company. Some relationships are just there to fill a void, but they don't nourish you, they don't care for you, and often they hurt you. That's why the third key to loving solitude is learning to choose who you let into your life. When you know how to be alone, you no longer accept relationships out of fear of ending up with no one. You accept them because they add something real, something that helps you grow. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're hungry and someone offers you a dish you don't like, one you know makes you sick. But you eat it anyway just so your stomach won't stay empty. That's what many people do in relationships. They settle for whatever is there, even if it's not good for them. Solitude, when you embrace it as an ally, gives you the strength to say, I'd rather wait than fill myself with something that harms me. Being alone also teaches you to listen to yourself more. Because when there's constant noise, when you're always focused on what others say, think, or expect of you, it's easy to lose your own voice. In silence, that voice grows stronger. You hear what you truly want, not what you were told you should want. Solitude is a demanding teacher, but a fair one. It doesn't flatter you, it doesn't lie, it doesn't give shortcuts. It shows you who you are, unfiltered. And sometimes that's tough. But when you accept it, you start walking with a different kind of confidence. You're no longer begging for affection. You're sharing from the abundance you found within yourself. Here's something important. Solitude isn't the enemy of love, friendship, or family. It's simply the space where you strengthen yourself, so those connections aren't a desperate need, but a free choice. When you start to feel comfortable in your own company, the way you see time changes. You don't need to fill it with forced activities or with people just so you're not alone. You discover you can enjoy things that once went unnoticed. A calm walk, reading without rushing, looking out the window and letting your mind wander. The fourth key to loving solitude is recognizing and cultivating your own interests. Because if you don't know what you enjoy, if you don't have passions that move you, then time alone can feel heavy. But when you find activities that motivate you, solitude becomes fertile ground for growth. This doesn't have to be extraordinary. You don't need to climb mountains or learn 5 languages. It could be as simple as drawing, cooking, putting together a puzzle, playing an instrument, writing what you feel. The key is doing these things for yourself, without waiting for external approval. When you develop hobbies and passions, solitude stops being empty and becomes creative space. That's where the magic starts. You create without the pressure of pleasing others, without comparing, without measuring every step. You connect with the feeling that what you do has value simply because you enjoy it. And spending time on your personal interests strengthens you emotionally, because you begin to feel that your happiness doesn't depend on anyone's presence. You realize you can generate your own moments of well-being. And here's a beautiful detail. When you learn to enjoy what you love in solitude, if one day you share it with someone else, it comes from a different place. It's not, I need you to be happy. It's, I'd love to share this thing that already makes me happy with you. That difference changes everything. Let me tell you a story, because sometimes other people's experiences help us see what we haven't yet discovered in ourselves. Some time ago, in one of my sessions, I met Laura, a woman a little over 50, who had spent most of her life in relationships. When she came to see me, she had been separated for only 3 months and was convinced she couldn't handle solitude. Her phrase was clear: I don't know who I am without someone next to me. The first sessions were filled with tears, not over the person she'd left, but over the idea of not having someone in that place. The absence made her feel incomplete, as if her identity had disappeared with the relationship. One day, I suggested something simple but challenging. This week, I want you to go on a date with yourself. She laughed nervously and said, And what do I do? Talk to myself. I explained the idea was to choose a moment just for her, something she enjoyed, and do it alone. It could be going to a cafe, the movies, a walk by the waterfront, whatever, but alone. The next week, she came back different. She told me she'd gone to a bookstore, sat with a cup of tea, and browsed books. At first, she felt strange, like everyone was looking at her, but then she started to enjoy it. She realized she didn't have to coordinate with anyone, didn't have to compromise on what to do or where to go, and that time belonged entirely to her. Over time, Laura not only learned to be alone, she started to seek out those moments. She discovered solitude wasn't absence, but a space of freedom. And she told me something I'll never forget. Now I know that when someone comes into my life, it will be to add, not to complete me. That's the fifth key. Go on dates with yourself. Don't wait for someone else to invite you to enjoy something beautiful. Invite yourself. Gift yourself that moment, because when you treat yourself the way you'd want someone else to treat you, you begin to feel like you're not missing anything. And when you start creating those spaces for yourself, something interesting happens. You start to protect your energy more. You realize not all people or environments are good for your peace. And here comes the sixth key to loving solitude: learning to say no. Saying no isn't selfish, it's self-care. Because so often we end up in places we don't want to be, with people we don't connect with, just out of fear of upsetting someone or of being alone. But that's a trap. Every time you say yes to something you don't want, you drift a little further from yourself. Healthy solitude gives you the courage to choose. When you've learned to enjoy being alone, your voice doesn't shake when you turn down what's not good for you, because you know you won't be left empty by saying no. Your life already has content. You fill it yourself. Here's a mental image I want to share. Imagine your energy is like a clear pitcher of water. Every unnecessary commitment, every meeting you didn't want, every forced yes. It's like throwing a handful of dirt inside. At first, you barely notice. But over time, the water stops being clear. That's what happens to you when you don't protect your time and your peace. Learning to say no is putting in a filter, not because you don't want to share, but because not everything deserves your clean pitcher. And when you protect it, when you only fill it with what you truly want, everything that enters your life starts to have more meaning. At first, saying no feels uncomfortable, especially if you've always been a people pleaser. But the freedom you feel afterward is priceless. It's the peace of knowing that what's in your life is there because you chose it, not because you were afraid of being alone. At some point on the journey of learning to love solitude, it feels like an awakening. It's that moment when you stop measuring your worth by who's with you, and you start seeing it in who you are, in what you create, in what you share. The seventh key to loving solitude is building your own inner refuge. An emotional space you can always return to, no matter what's happening outside. That refuge isn't a physical place, it's a feeling, the certainty that no matter what happens, you are there for you. In that process, I want to leave you with a phrase I love by Jean-Paul Sartre. If you feel lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company. Strong words, right? But it's true. Because if you don't learn to love yourself and feel good with yourself, no external company will ever fill that void. Your inner refuge is built with small daily actions. Talking to yourself with respect, not judging yourself too harshly, recognizing your achievements, even the small ones. It's also nurtured by habits that strengthen you. Meditation, journaling, walking, listening to music that connects you to yourself. That refuge is what allows you to be at peace, even in the middle of the world's noise. It's what gives you the strength not to accept just anything out of fear of being alone. And the best part? The stronger you build it, the more selective you become about what you let into your life. Let me put it this way. When you have an inner refuge, you don't need anyone to rescue you. You can invite someone in, yes, but you'll never again hand over the keys to just anyone. Something many people don't understand is that solitude, when lived well, doesn't isolate you, it expands you. Because when you learn to be with yourself, you begin to form healthier relationships with others. You no longer seek company out of lack, but from abundance. The 8th key to loving solitude is using it to get to know yourself deeply. It may sound obvious, but most people don't know themselves as much as they think. We live so busy responding to what others expect that we rarely ask ourselves what we truly want. In those quiet moments, you can start exploring essential questions. What am I passionate about? What drains me? What dreams have I kept hidden out of fear of what others might say? What are my non-negotiable boundaries? Knowing yourself also means looking at the parts of you you might not like. Your anger, your insecurities, your fears. All of that is also you. And solitude is the perfect ground to reconcile with those parts. Because without the pressure to please or fit in, you can observe yourself with more honesty. Sometimes this process hurts. I won't lie, there are days when introspection stirs up old wounds. But that pain is part of deep work that, once you go through it, leaves you stronger and clearer. When you truly know yourself, it's much harder for anyone to manipulate you, confuse you, or make you doubt your worth. Because you're not looking for someone else to tell you who you are, you already know. And that certainty is pure freedom. When you understand solitude as a space of self-discovery, you also begin to notice something valuable. Not every emotion that shows up in it is comfortable, but every emotion carries a message. The 9th key to loving solitude is learning to hold your emotions without running from them. In our culture, we're so used to distracting ourselves when something feels uncomfortable. If we feel sad, we turn on the TV. If we feel anxious, we rush out to seek company. If we're bored, we grab our phone and fill ourselves with noise. But solitude invites you to do the opposite, to stay present, breathing, facing whatever shows up. At first, it feels uncomfortable, like sitting with a guest you weren't expecting. But if you listen, if you give it space, you'll discover that guests didn't come to stay forever. They came to teach you something. Here's an example. If in solitude you feel lonely and sad, that may be showing you that your emotional life needs more nourishment, not necessarily with more people, but with more purpose and meaning. If anxiety shows up, maybe it's because you're living more in the future than in the present. Solitude points it out to you, and that's where the opportunity lies to work on it. Holding an emotion doesn't mean locking yourself inside it. It means letting it speak to you before it leaves. It's about understanding that there are no good or bad emotions. There are emotions that inform you about how you're living. When you learn not to run from what you feel, solitude stops being a threat and becomes an inner laboratory, where every sensation is a clue about how to live better. There comes a moment on this journey when solitude ceases to be an absence and turns into a home. And once you reach that point, everything changes. You stop measuring your well-being by how many people are around you, and you begin to measure it by the quality of connection you have with yourself. The 10th key to loving solitude is creating personal rituals that give you meaning and structure. Because yes, solitude is freedom, but it also needs a framework, a routine that gives it shape so it doesn't turn into chaos or apathy. A personal ritual can be as simple as getting up and meditating for 10 minutes, writing in a journal before bed, having tea while listening to calm music, or going for a walk at the same time every day. These aren't activities to kill time. They're spaces to honor it. These rituals act like emotional anchors. They help you feel accompanied by yourself. Every time you keep one, it's as if you're saying, "I'm here for me. I care for myself. I respect myself." And that strengthens you more than you imagine. Rituals are also a way to show your mind that your time is valuable. If you fill it with acts that nourish you, solitude stops being an empty field and becomes a garden you cultivate every day. Think of it this way. The difference between solitude you enjoy and solitude you suffer often lies in what you do with it. You can spend hours staring at the clock waiting for something to happen, or you can use that time to build yourself, to nurture yourself, to renew yourself. Rituals are the simplest way to remind yourself that your life has its own rhythm, and you don't need others to set it for you. Let me tell you another story, because sometimes what we go through ourselves makes more sense when we see it reflected in someone else. A few years ago, I met Martin, a man in his 40s who had gone through a tough breakup. He had been in a relationship for 15 years, and suddenly found himself alone in an empty apartment. He described it like this: "I come home from work, open the door, and it's like stepping into a lifeless place." In the first sessions, all he wanted to do was fill the silence. He'd turn on the TV the second he walked in, call friends even if he had nothing to say, go out even when he didn't feel like it. He did it so he wouldn't hear what solitude was trying to tell him. One day, I suggested something that caught him off guard. What if instead of running from that silence, you invited it to sit with you? He laughed, but he tried it. The first night he came home and didn't turn on the TV, he told me he felt an enormous emptiness, as if all at once he became aware of everything he'd been avoiding. Memories, fears, even anger came up, but he stayed. He made tea, sat down, and instead of escaping, he breathed. Over time, that same apartment that once felt like punishment began to feel like a refuge. He realized he could rearrange it however he liked, play music whenever he wanted, cook what he loved without negotiating with anyone. He began to discover himself in small things: a book that pulled him in, the habit of jotting down thoughts before bed, the freedom of choosing how to spend his time. One day he told me something that summed it all up. "Now I understand that I'm not alone. I'm with myself, and that's enough." That's another key to loving solitude. Transform your space into a place that embraces you. When your environment reflects care and love, being alone stops feeling like a sentence and becomes a pleasure. When you understand that your space can be a refuge, your relationship with solitude changes completely. You no longer see it as time you have to endure, but as time you want to protect. The 12th key to loving solitude is setting clear boundaries with the outside world. This means not everyone and everything can enter your personal time. It's not about shutting yourself away. It's about carefully choosing which energies you allow to accompany you. In practice, this might look like not answering messages right away, turning off notifications for certain periods, or even telling someone, "I can't today. I need some time for myself." Small actions that make the difference between feeling like you own your time and feeling like others control it for you. Because healthy solitude is, in part, an act of sovereignty. When you learn to protect that space, you defend it as you would something very valuable. Not just anyone can interrupt it. Not just anyone can occupy it. And here's something interesting. When others see that you value your time, they start respecting it more too. They stop seeing you as someone always available and begin to understand that your well-being is non-negotiable. Also, setting boundaries not only protects your solitude, it protects the quality of your relationships. Because if you're always available, shared moments lose value. but when you choose who and when to share them with, those encounters feel far more meaningful. So, solitude stops being a space filled in any way possible and becomes a sacred place, reserved for what truly matters. When you defend your time and space, you begin to notice a profound change. The quality of your energy improves. You feel lighter, more centered, more in control of your life. And that brings us to the 13th key to loving solitude, filling it with purpose. Solitude without purpose can feel heavy, like a dark room where you don't know what to do. But when you give it meaning, it becomes a motor. That purpose doesn't have to be something huge. It can be as simple as learning something new, improving a habit, caring for your physical and emotional health. For example, you might decide that your alone time will be used to read about a subject you love, to exercise, to cook more consciously, to learn a language. When your solitude aligns with something that nourishes you, it stops being time that just passes and becomes time that creates. The beauty of it is that this purpose is yours alone. It doesn't depend on someone else understanding it or approving it. And that's where true freedom lies, doing something because you feel it's important, not because it's asked of you, not because it's expected of you. And when your life in solitude has a clear purpose, even the difficult days feel lighter, because you know each moment is contributing to your growth. Solitude with purpose is like a personal workshop. You walk in with ideas, and you walk out with creations. And those creations aren't always tangible. Sometimes they're inner changes, mental clarity, emotional peace. If you can achieve this, solitude stops scaring you forever, because you no longer see it as being without anyone, but as being with what matters most. When your solitude begins to have purpose, something curious happens. You start to enjoy your own company more than much of the company you once sought out of habit. And that doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you've learned the difference between simply being accompanied and being genuinely accompanied. The 14th key to loving solitude is enjoying your own presence without feeling the need to justify it. Too often, when someone sees us alone, we feel compelled to explain, "I'm waiting for someone," or "I came alone because I had no one to go with," as if being alone required excuses. But when you truly embrace solitude, that need disappears. You can sit at a cafe, walk through a park, travel, or go to the movies alone, with a genuine smile, without caring what others think. This is one of the clearest signs that your relationship with yourself is healthy. You stop asking for permission to enjoy yourself. You no longer seek approval for your choices because you understand that the value of a moment isn't in someone else's gaze. It's in how you feel while living it. And let me tell you something. When you reach that point, the freedom is immense. Because even if one day you choose to share that moment with someone, it won't be to cover a void. It will be to add joy. Enjoying your own presence also means speaking kindly to yourself, treating yourself with the same gentleness you'd show someone you love. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. It's a quiet but profound change. You go from being a stranger to yourself to being your own best company. Let me tell you another story, because I know that often these concepts are easier to grasp when we see them in someone else's life. I met Elena at a personal growth workshop. She was 62, widowed for 3 years, and all her children lived in other cities. She said she didn't know what to do with so much free time, that her house felt enormous, and that silence crushed her. In the workshop, we suggested an exercise. Spend an entire afternoon without TV, without radio, without calls, without social media. The idea was simply to be with yourself. When she heard the instructions, Elena looked at me horrified. I'd go crazy, she said. But she agreed to try. The next day, she sent me a message. I did it. It was strange. But after a while, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years: calm. I made tea, sat on the balcony, listened to the birds, and realized I'd always been running, even when I didn't need to. From that day on, Elena began creating small routines in solitude. She signed up for painting classes, started walking every morning, and set aside one afternoon a week just to read or write in her journal. She told me something that stuck with me. I used to see solitude as punishment. Now I see it as a gift I hadn't known how to open. And that's the lesson from her story. Solitude can go from being a burden to being a privilege, if you learn to embrace it. It's not about filling every second, but about giving space to what truly nourishes you. Because when you open yourself to the possibility of enjoying your own company, you discover that you're not waiting on anyone to start living. You're living now, and that changes everything. When you understand, as it happened to Elena, that solitude can be a privilege, you begin to see your life through different eyes. It's no longer just free time. It's your time, the most valuable you have. The 16th key to loving solitude is using that time to invest in yourself. I'm not only talking about learning new things or improving skills, but about strengthening every area that makes you who you are: your mind, your body, your emotions, and your spirit. You can dedicate some of that time to reading about subjects that inspire you, exercising to feel more energized, trying activities that spark your curiosity. Even something as simple as caring for your plants, redecorating a space, or finally learning to cook that dish you always wanted. All of that is investing in yourself. When you invest in yourself, solitude stops being a parenthesis and becomes a stage of growth. You're not waiting for something to happen. You're creating something yourself. And that gives you an incredible sense of control and satisfaction. And there's a beautiful side effect to this personal investment. It boosts your self-esteem. Every new thing you learn, every improvement you make, every moment you dedicate to yourself is a way of saying, I matter. My time has value. I deserve the best I can give myself. Well-used solitude is like a workshop open 24/7, where you can always go to create, repair, or improve. And the best part is that what you build there doesn't disappear. It's yours. You carry it wherever you go, and it shows in how you walk, how you speak, how you make choices. That's why, if you want to love solitude, start seeing it as an investment, not as a cost. What you put into yourself today, you'll enjoy for the rest of your life. At some point on this path, you understand that solitude isn't just a temporary refuge. It's a solid foundation on which to build the rest of your life. And when you reach that point, everything you do starts to have more coherence, more meaning. The 17th key to loving solitude is learning to enjoy the present without constantly thinking about the future or the past. Because often what bothers us about being alone isn't the moment itself, but the flood of thoughts pulling us away from it. Here, I want to share with you a phrase that always struck me as deeply true from Eckhart Tolle. Wherever you are, be there totally. And that applies perfectly to solitude. If you're alone, don't fill your head with what's missing, or with what you should have. You're there with yourself in that moment, and that's enough to nourish you if you live it fully. Being present means connecting with your senses, noticing the aroma of the coffee you just made, listening to the sound of the rain, feeling your body breathing. These details may seem small, but when you notice them, they anchor you to the now and pull you away from anxiety or nostalgia. And let me tell you something. When you learn to enjoy such a simple, personal moment, you begin to understand that life isn't only made up of big events. It's made up of moments like these, which pass unnoticed if you don't pay attention. Solitude lived with presence stops being time that passes and becomes life that unfolds. And that change in perspective is what transforms the experience. When you start living solitude in the present, without dragging guilt from the past or anxiety about the future, you discover that calm isn't something you need to search for outside, but something you cultivate within. The 18th key to loving solitude is creating moments of conscious stillness. This isn't just about doing nothing. It's about choosing pauses that nourish you, that reconnect you with yourself, that bring you clarity. You can do this in many ways. Sitting on the couch with a blanket and simply looking out the window, practicing deep breathing, closing your eyes and letting your mind quiet down. These moments of stillness work like an emotional reset. They help you lower the intensity, organize your thoughts, and hear what your body and mind truly need. Modern life pushes us to always be in motion, always producing, always connected. But healthy solitude teaches you that not all progress is noisy, and sometimes the greatest progress happens in silence. In those moments of stillness, many people discover solutions to problems they'd been carrying or gain clarity about important decisions. Because when you lower the noise, the answers that were already inside you can finally be heard. And the most beautiful part is that you don't need perfect conditions to do this. It doesn't matter if your home is big or small, if you have lots of time or just a few minutes. The key is the intention to pause, to give yourself that gift, to be present with yourself. Solitude, when paired with conscious stillness, becomes an inner sanctuary you can return to whenever you need it. When you begin to create these moments of stillness, you realize something very important. You don't need big stimuli to feel fulfilled, and that's liberating because it breaks the constant dependence on external things to feel okay. The 19th key to loving solitude is cultivating emotional self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean shutting yourself off from affection or living disconnected from others. It means understanding that your well-being isn't in anyone else's hands but yours. Being emotionally self-sufficient means that while you value the company and love of others, you don't need them as a crutch to feel good. It's being able to say, "I'm happy because of who I am and what I do, not because of who is or isn't with me." When you achieve this, the way you connect with others changes. You no longer accept relationships out of fear of loneliness, but out of genuine desire to share. And that raises the quality of your connections, because they come from freedom, not from need. This kind of healthy solitude also gives you a sense of inner security. You know that no matter what happens, you have the ability to care for yourself, to support yourself, to hold yourself up. And that removes the fear of loss, because you no longer lose yourself when something external changes. Emotional self-sufficiency is like a muscle. You strengthen it with every decision you make to protect your peace, with every time you choose to listen to yourself before seeking outside validation. And the more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. That's when you begin to feel that your relationship with solitude isn't circumstantial. It's a conscious life choice. Let me tell you another story, because I know these real experiences help put a face and a feeling to what we're talking about. I met Rodrigo in a stress management course. He was 38, single, and in his own words, terrible at being alone. Whenever he had free time, he filled it with plans, outings, meetings, calls, anything to avoid being by himself. In one of the course activities, I asked everyone to write down what they would do if they had an entire day without contact with anyone. Rodrigo looked at me and said, "I have no idea. I've never thought about that. I think I'd go crazy." That response made it clear to me that his relationship with solitude was pure rejection. But we decided to work on it. I suggested he start with something simple. One morning, without a phone, without social media, without seeking company. At first, he admitted, the anxiety was overwhelming. He felt like he was wasting time, like things were happening outside that he was missing. But in that forced silence, something curious happened. He found himself preparing breakfast calmly, looking out the window, noticing details of his neighborhood he'd never seen before. Later, he started tidying up his space and discovered objects and memories that made him smile. He told me, "I didn't know I could feel good without doing anything productive or without being with people." Over time, that exercise became a habit. Rodrigo began reserving Sunday mornings just for himself, without commitments. He told me those moments became his grounding wire, helping him make better decisions, because he was no longer making them from pressure, but from the clarity those moments of solitude gave him. The lesson here is simple but powerful. When you stop fearing solitude, it starts showing you everything it can give you. It's not an enemy to defeat, it's a teacher you need to learn to listen to. Now, let's move to a new topic, one that may sound similar to what we've been talking about, but actually touches much deeper layers. How do you stop being afraid of ending up alone? That fear doesn't appear overnight. It's built little by little, from childhood, from what we saw and heard. Maybe you grew up in an environment where being alone was associated with abandonment, with rejection, with nobody loves you. Or maybe you saw people close to you cling to harmful relationships just to avoid facing solitude. All of that leaves marks, and without realizing it, you end up feeling like if you're left without company, something in you breaks. The first step to stop fearing solitude is recognizing where that fear comes from. It's not divine punishment nor personal weakness. It's an emotional construct you learned at some point in your life. And just as it was learned, it can be unlearned. Here's something important I want to tell you. Fear of solitude often isn't about the solitude itself, but about what we believe it means. We label it, "Nobody loves me. I'm not enough. I'll end up like this forever." And those labels weigh more than the actual experience of being alone. When you start questioning those beliefs, the fear begins to loosen its grip. You can ask yourself, is what I'm feeling true? Or is it a story I told myself because I learned it from someone else? Most of the time, you'll discover it's not your voice speaking. It's the voice of inherited fears, of other people's experiences, of messages you repeated without ever questioning them. The second step to letting go of that fear is creating positive experiences in solitude. If every time you're alone you experience it as punishment, your mind will always associate it with suffering. But if you begin to have pleasant moments by yourself, a walk, a coffee, a book, an activity you enjoy, your brain starts to register. Being alone can also be good. This doesn't happen overnight. It's like training a muscle that's been dormant. At first, it's hard, there's resistance. But with each small step, the fear shrinks. And I want you to remember something. You are not your fear. You can feel it, acknowledge it, but you can also choose not to let it control you. I want to share a real story here because I know that when we see the process in someone else, we realize it's possible for us too. Mariella came to my office with a lump in her throat. She was 45, had 2 grown children living on their own, and a relationship that had just ended. She told me something that stayed with me. I'm not hurt that he left. I'm terrified that there's no one. That there's no one was her way of describing an emptiness she'd been avoiding for a long time. In her case, the fear of solitude was so deep-rooted that even before separating, she was already filling every minute of her day with activities, messages, and meetings that didn't always interest her. She didn't do it out of enjoyment. She did it out of fear. In one session, I suggested a very simple exercise. Spend an afternoon at home without TV, without phone calls, without music, and write in a notebook everything she felt. At first, she said she felt like a caged animal. Within minutes, she began to feel anxious and thought time wasn't moving. But something changed the second time. That day, instead of fighting the silence, she sat with a mate tea, looked out the window, and simply observed. She told me that after a while, she started to relax. She realized nothing terrible happened, that her heart kept beating, the world kept turning, and she was still there. The following week, Mariella began to schedule small dates with herself. A coffee on her balcony, a walk in the park, reading in bed without rushing. Each time she managed to enjoy a moment like that, the fear shrank a little more. One day, she told me something that summed up her progress. I realized my fear wasn't of being alone, but of not knowing what to do with myself. Now I know what to do, and I like it. That's the key I want you to take with you today. When you discover how to be with yourself, the fear of being alone stops making sense. When I hear stories like Mariella's, it becomes clear that fear of solitude isn't defeated by waiting for it to magically disappear. It's defeated by walking toward it, slowly, but with determination. The third step to stop fearing being alone is breaking the association between solitude and abandonment. Many people don't fear the experience itself, but what they believe it represents. They think being alone means they're worthless, unloved, or broken. But I want us to change that perspective. Solitude isn't proof that nobody loves you. It's an opportunity to learn to love yourself. It's a space where you can notice what feels good for you, what hurts you, and what you want to build moving forward. To break that association, it's essential to create moments of voluntary solitude. Don't wait for life to leave you without company. Choose those moments yourself. Go for a walk alone. Have a coffee without your phone. Stay home for a while without turning on the TV. At first, the fear may show up, but each time you face it and realize nothing bad happens, your mind starts to record that there's no real danger. Here, it's also key to distinguish solitude from isolation. Solitude is a chosen space. Isolation is a prison that drains you. When you choose your alone time and fill it with activities that nourish you, you're not pulling away from the world, you're strengthening yourself. And there's more. Many of the most important decisions you'll ever make in life, you'll make in solitude. Because it's there, in that silence, that the voice that matters most, your own, becomes clear. So don't run from that moment, seek it out. Because far from being abandonment, it can become your greatest act of freedom. There's a moment in the journey of overcoming fear of solitude when you realize it's no longer a threat, but fertile ground for growth. That moment comes when you start to feel that your own company is enough, that you don't need to fill every silence with something or someone in order to feel alive. The fourth step to stop fearing solitude is redefining what being accompanied means to you. Because often we think company is just physical presence, but the truth is, there are people who can sit right next to you and still make you feel lonelier than ever. At this point, I want to leave you with a phrase that holds enormous truth, from Robin Williams. I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing is to end up with people who make you feel alone. When you internalize this, fear starts to dissolve. Because you realize the goal isn't to avoid solitude at any cost. It's to surround yourself with connections that truly add to your life. And if those connections aren't there, you can still be okay, because you don't depend on the wrong presence to feel accompanied. Redefining company means valuing quality over quantity. It means preferring a few shared moments that truly fulfill you over many hours with people who neither see you nor hear you. And when you understand that, you become more selective. Your time and your peace become priorities. The fear of ending up alone fades when you realize true company begins with yourself, and everything else is a complement, not a desperate necessity. When you redefine what company means to you, you start walking with a different kind of confidence. You no longer desperately seek someone to save you from loneliness, because you understand you're not lost. You're with yourself, and that's enough to carry you. The fifth step to stop fearing solitude is learning to distinguish between wanting company and needing it to feel okay. Because choosing to share a moment with someone because you enjoy their presence is one thing. Depending on that presence so you don't feel anxious is something entirely different. When you want company, you do it from a place of freedom. If it's there, you enjoy it. If it's not, you're still fine. But when you need it, it becomes a burden, for you and for the other person, because your well-being is tied to something you can't control. To practice this difference, start observing yourself. Next time you feel like calling someone or making a plan, ask yourself if it's because you truly want to share or because you don't know what to do with your time. If it's the second reason, but you still choose to stay with yourself for a while before reaching out to someone, you'll see that with practice, that impulse to fill the gap begins to loosen. This doesn't mean shutting yourself off from love, friendship, or family. It means your relationships stop being a desperate need and become a conscious choice. And that difference gives you enormous power over your emotional life. When you want company but don't need it in order to be okay, the fear of solitude loses its grip. Because you know that no matter what happens, you can sustain yourself with your own presence. When you learn to distinguish between wanting company and needing it to feel well, you begin to live your relationships with less weight and more enjoyment. You're no longer chasing anyone to soothe an emptiness. You're choosing who to share with what is already whole in you. The sixth step to stop fearing being alone is making peace with silence. Because in many cases, the fear of solitude is actually fear of being in silence with yourself. Silence has a bad reputation. Many find it uncomfortable because when external noise fades, the internal noise grows louder. Unresolved thoughts, buried emotions, unsettling memories. But that same silence that at first feels threatening, over time becomes a refuge. Making peace with silence means no longer seeing it as an enemy, but using it as a tool. You can start little by little. Turn off the TV while you eat. Go for a walk without headphones. Stay in bed for a few minutes after waking without looking at your phone. Short but powerful moments where you train your mind to feel safe without constant stimulation. Over time, that silence becomes a space of mental rest. That's where clarity for decision-making shows up, where creativity arises, where anxiety fades. And when you discover that silence doesn't hurt you but strengthens you, the fear of solitude loses one of its greatest allies. Because if you can be at peace with silence, you can also be at peace with yourself. When you reconcile with silence, you stop trying to fill it with just anything. You learn to enjoy it, like someone who appreciates a pause in the middle of a beautiful song, knowing that without those spaces, the music would lose its meaning. The seventh step to stop fearing being alone is to review the story you tell yourself about what it means to be alone. Because most of the time, what scares us isn't the actual experience. It's the narrative we've built around it. Maybe you grew up hearing phrases like, "Poor thing, he's alone," or "Nobody wants to be alone," or "Loneliness is sad." And those ideas slipped into your mind as absolute truths. But have you ever stopped to question them? Have you ever considered that maybe those phrases don't apply to your life, or that they can be replaced with healthier ones? Reviewing that internal story means challenging beliefs that might not even be yours. You can replace "being alone means being abandoned" with "being alone is a time to care for myself," or swap "solitude is a punishment" for solitude is an opportunity to grow. This change in narrative isn't instant magic, but it begins to reprogram your mind. Every time you notice fear showing up, pay attention to what you're telling yourself internally. If the phrase you repeat weakens you, replace it with one that gives you strength. When you change the story, the feeling changes too, because solitude stops carrying the weight of something negative and starts to feel like a legitimate, valuable space in your life. When you change the story you tell yourself about solitude, everything starts to look different. What once seemed like a desert turns into land where you can plant whatever you choose. The 8th step to stop fearing being alone is filling your time with actions that feed your sense of purpose, because fear grows in the empty spaces, those moments without direction or meaning. But when your time is invested in things that truly matter to you, solitude no longer feels like a threat. I'm not talking about cramming yourself with activities just to avoid thinking. I mean, choosing things that genuinely connect you with yourself. It could be learning something new, picking up a forgotten hobby, volunteering for a cause you care about, improving your physical health, or simply dedicating time to a personal project that inspires you. When you have a sense of purpose, solitude becomes an ally, because that alone time is what lets you focus, move forward, and enjoy the process without unnecessary distractions. And here's something powerful. A sense of purpose doesn't have to be huge or public. You can find it in everyday things. Caring for a garden, writing a few pages each day, cooking with love for yourself. The important thing is that it gives you inner satisfaction, not that it seeks outside approval. When your life is full of actions with meaning, fear of solitude shrinks, because you understand you're not left with nothing. You're left with yourself, doing what matters most to you. And when your time begins to fill with meaningful actions, you notice solitude stops being a shadow and becomes a light that accompanies you. And here's the key. You realize it's not a state you have to rush to overcome, but a place where you can stay as long as you want. The 9th step to stop fearing being alone is building an identity that doesn't depend on the company of others. Because if your self-worth is defined by who's next to you, every time someone leaves, it feels like part of you crumbles. Building your identity means asking yourself, who am I beyond my relationships? What defines me when I'm not playing a role for someone else? What passions, drives, or sources of pride do I have, even if no one else sees them? When you find those answers, your life starts revolving around what you choose to be, not what others expect you to be. And that changes everything, because fear of solitude loses its strength when you know that no matter what happens, you are still you. This doesn't mean relationships don't matter. It means they stop being the sole pillar holding up your identity. They're part of your life, but not your reason for existing. Let me put it this way. When your identity is built from the inside out, you can enjoy company without fearing its loss, because you know you won't lose yourself if someone else leaves. We've reached a key point, my friend, because after everything we've been working on, the fear of being alone begins to transform into something else. Respect for your own space, pride for having learned to sustain yourself. The 10th and final step to stop fearing solitude is to choose it from time to time, even when you don't need it. Yes, choose it, because when you choose something, it no longer has power over you. This isn't about locking yourself away or cutting yourself off from the world, but about taking moments alone as a conscious decision. You can do it for an entire day or just an hour, but let it be your choice. It's like telling your mind, your heart, I control this space, and I enjoy it. When you begin practicing this, something beautiful happens. Solitude stops being a ghost that only shows up in moments of crisis and becomes a natural part of your life. You live it like someone who has a comfortable home they can always return to for rest. And that's when you understand you were never truly alone. You always had the most important person by your side, yourself. Everything else, friends, a partner, family, becomes a valuable complement, but no longer a crutch to hold you up. Ending this process with the conscious choice of solitude is like closing a circle. You no longer fear it, avoid it, or suffer it. You recognize it as a place where you recharge, find answers, and cultivate the best relationship you can ever have, the one with yourself. And when you get to that point, fear dissolves, because you know that no matter what happens, you'll always be able to return to that safe space you've built inside. Now we move to a new theme, one that will develop calmly, step by step, until the final part of this journey: how to make solitude a healthy habit. And to achieve this, we're going to work on a different habit each time, so that you don't just understand it, but can actually incorporate it into your life. The first habit for making solitude healthy is scheduling alone time like an important appointment. Because solitude that only happens by accident or when there's leftover time usually ends up in second place. But when you treat it as a real commitment, it becomes a priority. Imagine it like this. In your calendar, there's a space marked, and that space is yours. Not for chores, not for answering messages, not for solving other people's problems. It's for you and what nourishes you. You might decide it's in the morning before the world starts demanding from you, at night when everything is quiet, or at any moment when you know there will be no interruptions. At first, you may struggle to defend that space. Obligations, people, even your own old habits will try to sneak in. But the firmer you are, the more natural it becomes to protect it. And one day, without realizing it, you'll notice that nobody questions it anymore, because you yourself respect it as something sacred. Scheduling solitude is sending yourself a very clear message. I matter. My well-being matters. My time has value. That simple act begins to change your relationship with yourself, because you're no longer waiting for the world to leave you a gap. You create it yourself. If you want solitude to become a healthy habit, it can't be an accident. It has to be chosen, protected, and anticipated. The day you mark it in your calendar and follow through, you'll have taken the first step toward making solitude an ally in your life. The second habit for making solitude healthy is giving each moment alone a clear purpose. Because solitude without direction can turn into boredom or draining thoughts. But solitude with intention becomes fertile ground for growth. That purpose doesn't always have to be deep or traditionally productive. It can be something as simple as resting your body, reading a few pages of an inspiring book, journaling your feelings, practicing meditation, listening to music that connects you with yourself, or preparing a meal you enjoy. The important thing is that it's not empty time, but meaningful time for you. When solitude has purpose, it stops feeling like a gap in the schedule and becomes a moment you actually look forward to. It becomes a space where you choose to plant something: peace, creativity, clarity, or renewed energy. You can help yourself by setting small goals for those moments. For example, today, in my alone time, I'll write 3 things I'm grateful for, or I'll walk for 30 minutes to disconnect from the noise. These goals aren't obligations. They're guides that give direction to your time. Also, giving solitude a purpose helps your mind associate it with well-being. Each time you do it, you're teaching yourself that being alone isn't negative. It's a space to recharge, reflect, or enjoy. Over time, you'll notice your relationship with solitude changes completely. It's no longer an absence of company. It's an encounter with yourself. And when you reach that point, you not only stop fearing it, you begin to seek it out as an essential part of your life. The third habit for making solitude a healthy space is protecting it as if it were a treasure. Because there's no use scheduling it and giving it purpose if every external or internal interruption ends up invading it. Protecting your alone time means setting clear boundaries. Sometimes those boundaries are outward, not answering messages during that time, turning off notifications, leaving your phone in another room, or telling people close to you that you'll be offline for a while. Other times, the boundaries are inward, not using that time to dwell on unfinished tasks, worry about others' problems, or fill it with distractions that pull you away from yourself. At first, you may feel some discomfort or even guilt for not being available. But remember this: just as you respect your work hours, your studies, or your commitments to others, you must also respect your commitments to yourself. Because if you don't prioritize your well-being, no one else will do it for you. Protecting your solitude also means choosing the right place and moment. It could be a corner of your home, a bench in the park, a quiet cafe, wherever allows you to disconnect from noise and reconnect with your inner self. Over time, that space becomes an emotional anchor. Each time you arrive there, your mind understands it's a moment for calm and self-care. With the habit of protecting your solitude, you start sending a powerful message to your life. My peace is not negotiable. And the more you repeat it, the more natural it becomes to defend that space without feeling you need to justify it. The fourth habit for making solitude a healthy space is creating a personal ritual to mark its beginning. Because when you turn that moment into a ritual, your mind and body begin to associate it with calm, enjoyment, and safety. A ritual doesn't have to be complicated. It could be making a hot drink and sitting in your favorite spot, lighting a candle, playing soft music, opening a journal and writing a few lines, or simply taking a few deep breaths to slow down the pace of the day. What matters is that the gesture repeats every time you enter your alone time. This small act has a huge effect. It's like a signal to your inner self that says, "Now I'm with me." And the more you repeat it, the easier it becomes to enter that mental state of connection and calm. The ritual also helps separate healthy solitude from any other moment when you happen to be alone, but distracted or worried. It reminds you that it's not the same thing to be without people as it is to be truly with yourself. The first can be empty. The second, a valuable encounter. Over time, this habit becomes so natural that as soon as you do your ritual, your mind knows it's time to lower its guard and be present. It's as if that small gesture were the key to entering your inner refuge. Once you achieve this, solitude stops being just a circumstance and becomes a place you know how to reach, no matter what's happening around you. I want to share a story because I know that giving these ideas a real face in life makes them clearer and more relatable. Some time ago, in one of my workshops, I met Gustavo. He was 50, and by his own words, he had never been alone by choice. He had always lived surrounded by family, friends, a partner. And when, due to life circumstances, he found himself living alone for the first time, he didn't know what to do with all that silence. He told me that in the first days he felt as if he were in someone else's house. He would turn on the TV the moment he walked in, play loud music, and find excuses to go out, even when he didn't feel like it. His goal was clear: to avoid the emptiness that scared him. One day, I suggested an exercise. I want you to choose an afternoon for yourself without TV, without music, without visitors, just you in your house. Gustavo reluctantly agreed. He told me the first hours were uncomfortable, that he felt he was wasting time. But as the afternoon went on, he began to look around and notice things he had never seen. A plant that needed water, a crooked picture, a book that had been waiting years to be read. He made himself a coffee, sat on the couch, and for the first time in a long while, felt that he was inhabiting his own space. From then on, he began a ritual. Every Thursday afternoon was his time. He used it to read, tidy up, cook something special, or simply rest. He told me something I never forgot. I discovered I'm not afraid of silence. I was afraid of not knowing what to do with it. This example connects with the fifth habit for making solitude a healthy space. Give it structure and frequency. When your alone time has a fixed day and hour, it stops being something improvised and becomes part of your life. And the more you repeat it, the more you enjoy it. The sixth habit for making solitude a healthy space is to vary the ways you experience it. Because if you always do the same thing in your alone moments, you risk them feeling monotonous or predictable. The idea is for each of those spaces to feel fresh, inspiring, and motivating. Varying doesn't mean overloading your solitude with 1,000 different activities each time, but alternating between different ways of being with yourself. Some days can be quiet and contemplative, reading, writing, meditating. Others can be active, walking, practicing a hobby, redecorating a space, learning something new. Variety not only keeps your interest alive, but also expands your ability to find joy in different forms of solitude. It also reminds us that solitude is not a fixed mold. It can be complete calm or free movement. It can happen in your home, in a park, or anywhere you can connect with yourself without distractions. Varying how you experience solitude also trains your mind to feel comfortable in different settings. You won't depend on just one ritual or space to find peace. You'll be able to carry that calm anywhere. Over time, you'll realize solitude isn't just a moment in your schedule. It's a skill, the ability to be well with yourself in any context. The seventh habit for making solitude a healthy space is learning to enjoy your own company without rushing. We live in a culture that pushes us to do everything quickly, to jump from one activity to another without pausing to savor the moment. But for solitude to be nourishing, you need to give it time. You can't live it as a chore to get done. When you give yourself permission to be with yourself without watching the clock, sensations and thoughts appear that don't surface when you're rushing. It's as if your mind says, finally, I can breathe. At this point, I want to leave you with a phrase from Friedrich Nietzsche that I find very accurate. He who does not have 2/3 of his day to himself is a slave. And it's true, if you can't reserve part of your time for yourself, you'll always feel like you're living for others or for external obligations. Having moments without rush is not a luxury. It's a necessity for emotional balance. You can practice it in simple ways. A slow breakfast, a walk without a destination, an entire afternoon without commitments. The activity doesn't matter. What matters is that it's yours, and that it isn't rushed by anything or anyone. Over time, this habit teaches you that your own presence is enough, and solitude stops being an empty state, becoming instead a space full of life and calm. The eighth habit for making solitude a healthy space is using it to reflect and make important decisions. Because when you're surrounded by noise, by other people's opinions and external pressures, it's easy to get confused and lose sight of what you truly believe. Solitude, by contrast, offers you a clear ground, free of interference. In that silence, your inner voice is heard more clearly, and it's there that you can ask yourself honestly, is what I'm doing really for me? Does this decision bring me closer to the life I want or further away? Am I acting out of conviction or out of habit? Many of the best decisions aren't born in meetings or conversations, but in quiet moments when you can think without hurry or distractions. Healthy solitude gives you that chance. To make use of it, you can create small reflection rituals. Write down pros and cons in a notebook, meditate on an option, or simply sit with a cup of tea and let ideas flow. It's not about forcing answers. It's about letting them appear naturally. Because when you lower external noise, your internal answers become clearer. Over time, you'll notice that trusting your own judgment becomes easier, and solitude stops being scary, because it turns into your best advisor. The ninth habit for making solitude a healthy space is combining it with activities that nourish your body. Because connection with yourself isn't only mental or emotional, it's also physical. Often, when we talk about solitude, we think of quiet activities like reading, meditating, or writing, and that's perfect. But you can also use that time to move your body, strengthen it, and care for it. Walk, stretch, practice yoga, dance alone at home, go for a run. Any activity that lets you feel your body alive and in sync with your mind. Exercising in solitude has something special. It gives you space to listen to your own rhythm. You don't have to keep pace with anyone or compare yourself to others. You can go slow or fast, take breaks when you want, and focus on how you feel in each movement. And moving your body during your alone time releases tension, improves your mood, and boosts your self-esteem. Because each time you care for yourself physically, you're sending yourself a clear message. I respect myself. I care for myself. I value myself. It doesn't matter if you have 10 minutes or an hour, if you're at home or outdoors. The important thing is to use solitude to reconnect with your physical self too, because a cared-for body strengthens a calm mind. When you unite physical well-being with emotional calm, solitude becomes a complete space of renewal. The 10th habit for making solitude a healthy space is learning to enjoy it outside your home too. Because many people only feel comfortable being alone in the controlled environment of their house, but lose that security in public spaces. Taking solitude with you to other places is a powerful way to reinforce your confidence. You can start with something simple. Have a coffee in a cafe without holding your phone, walk through a park, visit a bookstore, go to a museum, or even attend an activity you enjoy, even without company. When you do this, you teach your mind that you don't need to hide in a crowd to feel secure, and that you don't depend on having someone next to you to enjoy the moment. At first, you might feel a bit uncomfortable, that sensation that everyone is watching you, but the truth is, most people are busy with their own lives and hardly notice you're alone. The most valuable part of this habit is that it expands your freedom. It gives you the ability to go wherever you want and do whatever you want, without the absence of company being an obstacle. And once you taste that freedom, you'll never want to lose it again. Going out alone and feeling good about it is one of the clearest signs that your relationship with solitude is healthy, because that's when you stop seeing it as confinement and start experiencing it as a key that opens doors. The 11th habit for making solitude a healthy space is using part of that time to learn something new. Solitude isn't only for rest and reflection. It can also be for active growth. When you're alone, you have the chance to concentrate without interruptions, to explore topics that have always interested you, or to develop skills you may have set aside for lack of time. It could be learning a language, practicing an instrument, taking an online course, researching a topic you're passionate about, or even trying crafts and creative projects. Learning in solitude has a huge advantage. You can move at your own pace without comparing yourself or feeling pressured. If something is hard, you can repeat it 10 times. If something excites you, you can dive in without looking at the clock. And every new piece of knowledge or skill you acquire strengthens your self-esteem, because you prove to yourself that you're capable of growing and evolving on your own, without needing someone else to push or motivate you. This habit also nourishes your emotional independence. The more you develop your interest and skills, the richer and more valuable your inner life becomes. And that means that even when you don't have company, your world is still full of positive challenges and stimulation. When solitude becomes an ally for learning, it stops being empty time and turns into a space of personal expansion. The 12th habit for making solitude a healthy space is practicing gratitude in those alone moments. Gratitude has a transformative effect. It shifts the focus from what's missing to what's already present, and that reduces any sense of emptiness. In solitude, gratitude becomes even more powerful, because without external distractions, you can connect more deeply with what you truly value. You can practice it by writing down 3 things you feel grateful for each day, or simply by closing your eyes and mentally reviewing the good in your life. These don't need to be big achievements or extraordinary events. It could be as simple as a breakfast you enjoyed, a message that made you smile, the smell of rain, or the peace of being in your own space. This habit helps you associate solitude with positive sensations instead of discomfort or sadness. And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes to see that even when you're alone, abundance surrounds you. Gratitude also trains your mind to recognize what works, what adds value, and what's worth keeping in your life. And that helps you make better decisions about who to share your time and energy with, without fearing that solitude is a threat. With gratitude, solitude stops feeling like a gap and begins to feel like a place of fullness. The 13th habit for making solitude a healthy space is connecting with nature. Contact with the natural world has a unique power to calm the mind, balance emotions, and remind you that you're part of something greater. Being alone doesn't mean locking yourself away within 4 walls. You can go for a walk in the park, sit by a river, look at the sky from your terrace, or simply open the window and observe the movement of leaves and the singing of birds. When you connect with nature in solitude, your attention shifts away from daily worries and focuses on what's happening right now, the breeze on your skin, the smell of damp earth, the light filtering through branches. All of this acts as an anchor that brings you to the present. Nature also teaches without words. It shows you that everything has cycles, that nothing is permanent, and that even moments of stillness are part of growth. Understanding this makes solitude feel less like emptiness and more like a necessary pause to bloom. You can make this connection a weekly or daily habit depending on your possibilities. What matters is that it's not something occasional, but a steady part of your solitude routine. That way, each time you're alone, you'll know you can turn to nature as a safe and renewing space. The 14th habit for making solitude a healthy space is using that time to review and organize your inner world. Just as your home needs cleaning in order to feel comfortable, your inner self also needs space to arrange thoughts, emotions, and priorities. In daily life, we tend to accumulate worries, pending decisions, and emotions we don't process. If we don't give them room, they end up generating mental noise and emotional strain. Solitude, well used, is the perfect moment to put order into all of that. You can do it by writing in a notebook about what worries you, what you want to change, or what makes you doubtful. Sometimes just putting it into words helps you see it more clearly. You can also meditate, practice breathing exercises, or even talk out loud to organize your ideas as if you were conversing with a friend. This habit isn't about overanalyzing everything, but about letting go of what clutters your mind. Each time you practice it, you feel relief similar to tidying up a physical space. Everything becomes clearer, lighter, more accessible. Over time, organizing your inner world in solitude becomes a tool for making more conscious decisions, responding instead of reacting, and living with greater serenity. When you achieve this, solitude stops being a place where you get lost and becomes a space where you find yourself. I want to close this theme with a story, because nothing explains a habit better than seeing it in real life. A few years ago, I met Patricia, a 57-year-old woman who had spent most of her life caring for others. Her children, her husband, her parents. When her children became independent and her parents passed away, she found herself for the first time with no one constantly depending on her. She told me, with a mix of sadness and confusion, "I don't know who I am without a list of things to do for others." At first, her solitude overwhelmed her. She woke up late, spent hours in front of the TV, and felt like the days slipped by without meaning. But one day, in a session, I suggested she start with something simple. Dedicate half an hour a day just to herself, without doing anything for anyone else. She could read, write, walk, meditate, whatever she wanted, but it had to be exclusively for her own well-being. The first week was hard. She felt guilty for not doing something useful for someone else. But little by little, she began to notice changes. That half hour became an hour, and later an entire Sunday afternoon. In that time, she began to organize her thoughts, return to gardening she had abandoned years earlier, and even plan trips she had always postponed. One day, she told me something that made me smile. "I discovered my own company isn't boring. I'm more interesting than I thought." Patricia's story reflects what happens when solitude becomes a healthy habit. It stops feeling like dead time and transforms into the stage where a fuller version of yourself is born. And so, my friend, we understand that solitude, when chosen and cared for, is not a void, but fertile ground where the best of yourself grows. We've walked together a long path where we learn to look at solitude with new eyes. We've seen it as a teacher that teaches us to listen to ourselves, as an ally that protects us, as a habit we can cultivate day by day, and as a refuge we can always return to. We've discovered that solitude doesn't have to be empty space. It can be fertile ground where you plant calm, clarity, and self-love. Along this journey, we've talked about fears that once felt immense but shrank step by step. We've shared habits that strengthen the soul, strategies to turn silence into peace, and above all, real stories of people who learn to turn solitude into a safe, loving, and powerful place. If there's one thing I want you to hold on to, it's this. Solitude is not punishment, not failure, not a sign that something is wrong. It's a space that belongs to you by right. A space where you can be yourself without masks, without pressure, without outside demands. When you learn to inhabit it, you stop fearing it, and you begin to seek it out as an act of freedom. And to close, I want to give you a phrase from Osho that sums up what we've shared. If you love solitude, it's because you love your freedom. Hold that in your heart, because the greatest freedom you'll ever experience is not depending on anything or anyone to feel complete. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for accompanying me on this deep journey. Thank you for your time, for your openness, for allowing yourself to listen and reflect. Thank you for daring to look within, even when the path felt uncomfortable. Thank you for being here, for staying until the end, and for committing to your own well-being. Now, the rest of the path is yours. May you walk it with calm, with strength, and with the certainty that you will always carry within yourself the refuge you need, that silent and beautiful space we call solitude, which from now on will be your place of strength, your place of truth, your place of freedom.